So Russell has asked me.
No, we just arrived in our limo.
We just arrived in our pink limo, you said, purple limousine over there, to the Orpheum, an Art Deco cinema here in Sydney from the early 20th century. It used to be a theatre for like operas and plays and all these sorts of things. It's been a cinema since the 70s, I think.
You have to arrive in an ostentatious car.
If we could afford ostentatious cars like that, we would arrive in them. But it's such an exquisite cinema. It's a really good example of Art Deco art and architecture from the early 20th century. If you look at the font up there, the Hayden Orpheum Picture Palace, that font is very much rounded, emphasis on the geometry of the O's and the curves on the D's. Very straight lines for the rest of the fonts.
We've got a little table.
We've got a little table. So Egyptian food, there's an Egyptian restaurant nearby, was too exotic for Russell. So we're going to have some pizza before we go in to see No Country for Old Men. We'll be back with an intro for it soon. Okay, so we've sat down to have a pizza just before going to see No Country for Old Men. No Country for Old Men was directed by the Coen brothers, Joel and Ethan Coen, in 2007. It's hard to believe that it's over 25 years old. Isn't it? No, over 25. What am I saying? 18 years old? It's 18 years old, the film. Anyway, the novel was written in 2005 by Cormac McCarthy, who is considered the great American novelist. Here, if you don't believe that I read the book just before we've come to see the film again in the cinemas, look at the post-it notes. The film's title is taken from a quote. I'll cut that out. The film's title, No Country for Old Men, is a line taken from William Butler Yeats's Sailing to Byzantium. W.B. Yeats is a very famous Irish Catholic poet from the late 19th, early 20th century. He died in 1939 in France, and he was a theosophist, really interested in esotericism and also in Byzantium, that Eastern Christian civilization centered in the capital city of Constantinople on the shores of the Bosphorus. So in his poem Sailing to Byzantium, which is a surprising piece of work because at that time Byzantium was something that was criticized in contemporary scholarship of that period. It was looked down upon as an inferior version of the Roman Empire. He begins it with, "That is no country for old men." So this was published in 1928. "The young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations at their song. The salmon falls, the mackerel crowded seas, fish, flesh or fowl, commenced all summer long. Whatever is begotten, born and dies. Caught in that sensual music, all neglect, monuments of unaging intellect." So that's the very first stanza of the poem. It basically typifies the desire of him as an older person. Now he dies almost a decade after this. His desire to return to the carefree days of youth. And it's set in Byzantium because he believes that Byzantium, during the epoch that he's setting this poem, like the early Middle Ages, managed to synthesize, in his own words, history, religion and aesthetics, not just for the high echelons of society, but for common people as well. And that could be exemplified by church structures like Hagia Sophia, Holy Wisdom. Now, how this connects to the story that is written in No Country for Old Men, which is set in 1980 in Texas in the United States, is something that's also very interesting. The connection between Cormac McCarthy and W.B. Yeats should be clear enough from the fact that Cormac McCarthy is also an Irish Catholic. So, of course, he would have been reared on the writings of W.B. Yeats. But
he wasn't practicing, no.
He wasn't a practicing Catholic, but a nominal Catholic. If you're Irish, you'd know who W.B. Yeats is. Yeah, but certainly not a practicing Catholic. No Country for Old Men is from the perspective of Ed Tom, the sheriff in, I can't remember the name of the town that it's set in. reminiscing about a better America, a better society, a better civilization, that it's basically about the moral degradation of American society as illustrated through the incursion of narcotics and drugs from Mexico into Texas. And it's not a country for old men anymore, because they reminisce for their younger days when things were a bit more, the American dream, a bit more safe, a bit more normal. That's the relationship between, in terms of setting, Sailing to Byzantium and No Country for Old Men. Sailing to Byzantium was a place that Yeats in his later life yearned for, because it tried to freeze the aging process with its sages standing in God's holy fire to read from the third stanza, as in the gold mosaic of a wall. These are the icons of Greek Orthodox Christianity, the holy sages frozen in time. They're ageless, they're undying, and Byzantium promoted these figures in churches and in the public thoroughfares. He wants to be taken into the artifice of eternity. W.B. Yeats does. And you get a sense that McCarthy feels the same way. He died a couple of years ago in 2023 at the age of 89. When this book was written, No Country for Old Men, he would have been in his 60s. So he was at a similar age to Yeats. He's reflecting about a better time for himself personally and for the United States. And No Country for Old Men, the line from Yeats' Sailing to Byzantium, typifies or exemplifies that longing for a better time. What do you say, Russell?
What I'm looking for in the film?
Yes, but connecting it organically to what I've just discussed
well,
about.
I only recently did a little bit of research into the Yeats poem, and there was a few things about this notion of eternal recurrence, which shows up in the film. And I think there's some Nietzschean influence in Cormac McCarthy, but there's this thing about thesis, antithesis, the old, the young, the regeneration, rebirth. And there's something about that as well, the eternal recurrence of the younger generation come in and have to find new ways of living, and then the cycle keeps going on and on. But one difference here is that they're coming into a new world in which they don't know what the rules are to follow.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm trying to unpack too much.
All at once, just before pizza.
I've got a lot of.
But that's generational. That's the generational element. Look, the reflections of Ed Tom. So let's just stick with Ed Tom for now, because there are other characters. There's Moss and there's Chigurh. Okay, and we'll talk about them maybe later. But from Ed Tom's perspective, at least, his reflections, right, have to deal with some themes that you and I would be used to in our School of Philosophy and Theology at the University of Notre Dame. There is apocalypticism, end of the world type stuff.
Well, they're probably more yours. So there's the symbolic, biblical overtones.
Yes, yeah.
The fire and the end, and the apocalyptic scenes, the generations, the fallenness of the world.
The fallenness of the world, influence of Satan, for example. Yeah.
The choicest things are getting more on the philosophy thing, because there's all about this like moral sentimental theory. There's moral choice theory. There's
so the choice stuff.
Determinism.
Then bring in Chigurh. What is Chigurh doing in relation to choice?
Well, is Chigurh an instrument of fate, or as he seems to be doing, this personal self-reflection? There's a difference between the book and the movie a little bit. But Chigurh's having a realization about who he is as how he decides, and for a good example of that is the way he kills the people.
He's a murderer, Chigurh. He's a bad guy.
Yeah, he considers.
Tom's a sheriff. Yeah.
So, Carla Jean and Wells, he talks to them in depth about dying a dignified death, but yet
these are his murder victims,
and he's saying that they made decisions that got them to where they are, and they have to accept their death. So it's a weird mix of choice and fatalism, but everyone else in the film who's just an ordinary Joe Blow just gets a cattle gun prod to the head.
Yeah,
they don't get a story.
They don't get this narrative where Chigurh presents them. He's a Mexican drug runner. He's even more than that. He's a force of nature. In the book, which actually is. Cormac McCarthy has a very interesting writing style. There's a lack of punctuation, but in this book, each chapter is prefaced with the reflections by Ed Tom about the sorts of themes we're addressing, the decline of morals in American society, the younger generation giving way to the older generation that doesn't understand them, the influence of evil. But you know what, I've marked it out here because it's a very interesting quote in relation to the sort of person that he will be hunting in Chigurh, although never do their paths really cross. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. I don't know what them eyes was the windows to, and I guess I'd soon as not know. So he's discussing someone who he put in prison and who was given the electric chair. Somewhere out there is a true and living prophet of destruction, and I don't want to confront him. I know he's real. I have seen his work. I walked in front of those eyes once. I won't do it again. So there's this idea of the prophecy that an even darker force is out there than what he's already sort of encountered,
Should we? I think our pizzas are coming up. Should we?
Okay, so we've discussed apocalypticism, regeneration, and choice. So Chigurh is a combination of inevitability, so determinism,
and also societal choice.
Societal choice, but he gives everybody a choice, which is the paradox of Chigurh.
And the character of America, and of course violence is going to be important too, as usual.
Yeah. Okay, we'll continue after we have pizza. Yep. Cool. The Orpheum at night, friends. We've had our pizza. It's a noisy road, so we'll put our mics back on when we go into the cinema. We don't want to lose the bits and bobs. Russell almost lost the magnet. Did you not, Russell? Yeah, no. Yeah, you did. So, Coen brothers, let's just talk about the characters and how, the actors who play them in the film itself, right? So the main characters in the novel adapted for the film are Ed Tom, played by Tommy Lee Jones. You have Moss, Llewelyn Moss, played ably and aptly, and I should have said that about the brilliant Tommy Lee Jones as well, played by Josh Brolin. It was a breakout role for Josh Brolin. And then you have the masterful Javier Bardem playing the Chigurh, the Anton Chigurh, the killer. We spoke a little bit about context. Of course, the Vietnam War is something that acts as a backdrop to this film. Ed, Tom, and Moss are war veterans. Look, we don't want to get into the characters too much now.
And Ed was World War II.
Sorry, what am I saying? Ed Tom is World War II, that's right. And Llewelyn Moss is Vietnam War. Thanks for clarifying that. Look, Orpheum, fantastic. There's Carla Jean in the novel. I don't remember who plays her in the film. That's... can we go here? Oh, I think it's the next one. That's Moss's wife. Oh, I wish I'd gotten that on camera. Russell almost stacked it. Okay, so here we are, once again in the Orpheum.
Do you want to sit in there?
Yeah, we can go in there if you like. And so, have you got the tickets? Do you need to give them to anybody? Okay, so...
What do you want to drink?
We'll get a drink, but I'm just talking about the characters and the actors who play them. The Coen brothers are famous for making... They did Fargo, they did Blood Simple, and The Big Lebowski, all great films. Russell is saying that No Country might just be his favourite film.
Maybe.
Although that changes every other day. Originally it was Assassination of Jesse James.
No, still is.
Is that the Coen brothers too?
That There Will Be Blood, this... Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Silence of Sleep.
Okay. All right, so he did that very quickly. I'm not going to do the same for you now. Look, we're going to get back to you once we've watched the film. The themes, that's Russell dropping his water bottle. The themes include those that we just discussed about apocalypticism, about fate and determinism, right? So are our consequences, are our actions the inevitable consequences of preceding actions? And does that mean that the choices that we make lead to inevitable outcomes which cannot be avoided or prevented? That's the kind of determinism, paradoxically combined with chance, that Chigurh exemplifies in this film. he gives two of his murder victims, at least, the choice to choose heads or tails. And if they get it correct, he won't kill them, right?
Don't give spoilers for people. They might be watching it the first time. No, not them, not the viewers. The people in the cinema.
We are sequestered in a corner. There's no one here. There's just this statue of the Art Deco lady, and these geometric and brightly coloured lights. It's all squares and rectangles with Art Deco and thick shapes. So,
but just another thing
yep.
that you missed out is that it's fate or fatalism.
Determinism, fatalism, same thing.
Cycles, choices, but then there's that aspect of how much is determined by the choices made by the characters.
Yes, so this is like the inverse of what I just said, yeah.
Yeah, well, and there's like some seeming contradictions or paradoxes in the film.
Which we'll talk about after.
Yeah. I'll leave that.
Two more main themes. We're doing the main themes now. So another main theme is God's justice, known as Theodicy in the disciplines of philosophy and theology. So is God just for allowing the sort of things that take place to take place? This is something that's reflected upon especially by Tommy Lee Jones's character. I guess the Theodicy is another one. There's a lot of ethical stuff that comes out in terms of the decline of, moral values, let's say, at the turn of of 1980. It's 1980. The film is set in 1980.
There's also the element of there's a discussion, at least with his friend. He's from Ed Tom's friend from the force that was shot, and he's more of a deist, in which there's a God, but God has no control over these events. And then that's in comparison to Chigurh, who's, we presume, some kind of atheist, and then Moss, who's just definitely an atheist nihilist.
Moss is definitely an atheist and a nihilist, and in fact it's his decision early on in the film.
He covers all four of those perspectives. Theist, deist, atheist, we're not sure what Chigurh is, and nihilist. Maybe he's a nihilist and
maybe he has embraced nihilism in a Nietzschean sense to become a Superman in the sense of an Ubermensch in the most pejorative way. So we'll return to all these themes after we watch the film. See you soon.
Peace.
Out. As Russell admires the Art Deco decor of the bar up here at the Hayden Wolf AM, I'm going to just read some of the passages, the relevant passages from McCarthy's novel, which we picked out as relevant thematically to the sorts of things that are going to take place in the movie as well. There is, at the beginning of the second chapter, an illustration of how close he came to being murdered just for trying to pull someone over as a police officer. So it begins to track the increase in violence and degradation, the gradual degradation of American society. That's the beginning of the second chapter. At the beginning of the third chapter, he talks about the fact that I never had to kill nobody, he says, and I'm very glad of that fact. Some of the old-time sheriffs wouldn't even carry a firearm. A lot of folks find that hard to believe, but it's a fact. Jim Scarborough never carried one. And then he sort of contrasts that to the fact that by 1980, if you didn't carry a firearm, you'd be in a lot of trouble. So even though he fought in the Second World War, in that interim period there was no need to have a weapon holstered. The beginning of chapter 4, there's some light in the darkness because he also ruminates about his relationship with his wife, Loretta, who he loves, and they weren't able to have a child. They lost their daughter, whether it was a miscarriage or something like that isn't made clear. But he stresses optimism as well. At the beginning of the fourth chapter, his personal first-person reflection. People complain about the bad things that happen to them, that they don't deserve, but they seldom mention the good, about what they done to deserve them things.
I don't recall that I ever give the good Lord all that much cause to smile on me, but he did, in relation to his wife, Loretta. So there's that Christian background as well, middle class Protestantism of the American South. Okay. Just before the 5th chapter, another reflection, more darkness, about a couple who was luring old people, a younger couple, luring old people into their homes and murdering them and taking their security checks. You cannot make up such a thing as that, he writes. I dare you to even try. So this is just incomprehensible to him, all this sort of thing. The beginning of chapter 6, how some of the boys who get in trouble in their town and he'd arrest and pick up and put in jail would be visited by his wife. She would bring them, they wouldn't do serious crimes, it'd be petty theft, things like that, and she would bring them food and supper and take care of them. They would get out of jail and then they'd come and visit him at his house to thank his wife for turning them around and for helping them. The beginning of the 7th chapter, he says that he won't talk about the war neither, the Second World War. I was supposed to be a war hero and I lost a whole squad of men, got decorated for it. They died and I got a medal. I don't even need to know what you think about that. There ain't a day I don't remember it. And in the book, he discusses the circumstances that led to him getting that medal and to his squad of men dying. And he's lived with the guilty conscience his whole life because he didn't stay behind and die with them, basically. And that's that guilty conscience comes up again in relation to Anton Chigurh. We'll see that he'll leave the police force, he'll retire early so that he won't have to face this new kind of demon that the New World has produced. Again, in relation to how integrated he and his wife are into the society, the local town, he says things like, we try to make it to events, to take care of the community. And he said he went to a conference in Corpus Christi, and I got set next to this woman. She was the wife of somebody or other, and she kept talking about the right wing this and the right wing that. So this brings in the growing divide between conservatives and liberals in the United States. I ain't even sure what she meant by it. See, for wholesome people who just have some traditional morals, this right-wing, left-wing thing doesn't even make any sense. The people I know are mostly just common people, common as dirt, as the saying goes. I told her that and she looked at me funny. She thought I was saying something bad about them, but of course that's a high compliment in my part of the world. Common as dirt. She kept on, finally told me, said, I don't like the way this country is headed. I want my granddaughter to be able to have an abortion. Which of course, from a moral or Christian point of view would be considered wrong, right? And I said, well, ma'am, I don't think you got any worries about the way that the country is headed. The way I see it going, I don't have much doubt but what she'll be able to have an abortion. I'm going to say that not only will she be able to have an abortion, she'll be able to have you put to sleep, which pretty much ended the conversation. So two very controversial topics there, abortion and euthanasia, which to somebody from the mid-20th century in 1980 would have been considered very wrong, okay? Irrespective of what you as a viewer may or may not think about these things. People with Christian sentiments wouldn't agree. So that's all coming out as part of the degradation that he's mapping out here. And then it gets theological at the beginning of the 8th chapter. I think if you were Satan and you were sitting around trying to think up something that would just bring the human race to its knees, what you would probably come up with is narcotics. Maybe he did. I told that to somebody at breakfast the other morning, and they asked me if I believed in Satan. I said, well, that ain't the point. And they said, I know, but do you? I had to think about that. I guess as a boy I did. Come the middle years, my belief, I reckon, had waned somewhat. Now I'm starting to lean back the other way. He explains, as in Satan explains, a lot of things that otherwise don't have no explanation. Or not to me, they don't. So the kind of horrific murders committed by Chigurh are just incomprehensible to him and to anybody who's right thinking, right? I mean, how can you be callous in such a way? How can you have so little value for human life? I mean, that's what Chigurh is, what he represents, a kind of devaluing. Although he has his own code, which Russell will discuss later. The beginning of chapter 10. The other thing that was on my mind I never even got around to, but I believe it to be related, because I believe that whatever you do in your life, it will get back to you. If you live long enough, it will. So almost like a karma, but it's more like, divine retribution. And I think of no reason in the world for that no good to have killed that girl. And that's referring to Carla Jean, to Llewelyn Moss's wife, who Chigurh eventually kills. What did she ever do to him? And then he reflects upon that more, but basically Chigurh has his own twisted logic of the inevitability of her death, which is a promise that he makes to Moss when he offers him an ultimatum to give himself up, or he'll go off and kill his wife, Carla Jean. Look, and there are more and more. I don't want to discuss some of the last ones, because the last ones have to do with prophecy and with hope. We'll probably get to in the end. After we watch the film, we'll fill in the content and the storyline a bit more. Okay? Cheers.
How can we not show you this cinema? Look at this Art Deco masterpiece. Look at those triangles all in a row, that zigzag design.
Wait, do you sit anywhere?
That you can sit anywhere. You sit anywhere you want. Sorry, mate. Sorry. It's just a phenomenal cinema. Look at the curtain for the theatre. It's a proper theatrical approach to cinema that we are about to participate in here with Russell, who got his chop top and his Pepsi after a beer. He's properly degenerated into his 16-year-old self. Look at the colours, blue and red, very Art Deco. Good space to watch No Country for Old Men in, for sure.
Anyway, so No Country for Old Men, the plot line. The plot line is basically, look, it's a Western, but like a postmodern Western in a sense. It doesn't follow the conventional tropes or motifs of, this kind of new frontier in the Western territories, Western states of the United States of America that become civilized by, railroad tracks and corporations and everything else. This is the decline of civilization in Texas and various, cities in Texas. I keep trying to remember the name of the town that the sheriff is from, Ed Tom, played by Tommy Lee Jones, but I keep forgetting. I'll put it in the notes at the bottom of this, but there's Odessa and El Paso. So, the film starts with, same as the book, a deputy picking up Chigurh, to pronounce it correctly, Anton Chigurh. His character, played by Javier Bardem, who we find out in the book, it's not there in the film. In the book, he wanted to see if he could get arrested and break out, and he kills the deputy, murders him. And then he steals a patrol car, a police car, drives on a little bit, and then murders someone else who he pulls over with that pressure gun. What is that thing called?
I don't know what they're called particularly. They're cattle guns.
Cattle gun.
And I've
which has got a gas tank attached.
Yeah, you can Google online. There's like a MythBusters thing about it, and it's relatively accurate.
He kills this guy, takes his car, drives off. Then it jumps to Moss's character, played by Josh Brolin, who's hunting a deer, and he wounds the deer, and he discovers as he's chasing it, a dog limping. Lo and behold, across this massive open caldera, it's like the remains of a volcano, He sees a whole bunch of cars. There's been a shootout. There are bodies lying everywhere, including a dead dog. And he goes down there to investigate. And long story short, he finds a lot of money. It was a drug bust a drug deal that went wrong.
Yeah, 2 million.
2 million. 2 million.
Truck full of heroin in the
truck
back.
full of heroin in the back. $2 million. And look, a lot of this is pretty identical to the book so far, except the book does describe in detail just how careful he is being as a Vietnam War veteran. Just how careful he's being.
No, there's a few things missing. It might be at risk of turning this too much into the difference between the book and the movie, but
we should do some of that though. We should look at
in the book. So McCarthy doesn't sort of give you the inner monologue or the inner life of the characters, except when they're monologuing out loud to themselves. And so what you get is him sort of having a dialogue with himself about just how crazy it is what he's doing.
That's right. Yeah.
He's saying, "You're an idiot. You're about to get in a real mess. Everything's changed now." So you don't get that in the film, but you see it in the way he looks.
In the way he looks, he's nervous, anxious, but he's very methodical in picking up weapons, in retrieving the money and leaving. Anyway, it's his conscience which gets him in the end, because there was one of the Mexicans was still alive, but obviously about to die, right? And he was asking for water, and Moss tells him, "I don't have any water." But then after he comes home, tells his wife Carla Jean that he's discovered all this money. Agua, that's right. In the middle of the night, he gets up, fills a bottle with water, and takes it out there to give him some water. It turns out the cartel that was involved, so obviously the drug bust has to do with Mexican cartel bringing over narcotics into the United States through the Texas border. The cartel has sent out people to find out what happened, and as he's going down into the caldera to give this guy some water, he finds that he's dead, and then he looks up at his truck and he sees that another truck has appeared beside it. They let down his tires, and it all goes to hell from there. They chase him down. He just makes it out alive. That scene with him shooting the dog is totally interpolated by the Coen brothers, although it works, right? The dog that's chasing after him. And then what happens next, Russell, so that I'm not recounting the whole story this way?
You could go through it again. I guess the main thing then is that he's basically discussing with Carla Jean that they've got to run for it. He's aware as well in the book. He talks about I know what I've done. My family are going to be at risk. So he's aware of this sort of. He's conscious of the consequences of the decision he's made.
Yeah, the stakes are high. The stakes are high, and so Chigurh enters. He enters into it because he's basically been hired by whoever it is on the American side who's bringing the drugs into the country to find out what happened at this drug deal gone wrong. We know that at least one person out of that drug deal stole the money and ran off. He ends up. Moss finds him dead as well. So basically, Chigurh's role as a bounty hunter, more or less, is to retrieve the money. But he's ruthless. He uses that, what's it called again? Stun gun? Not a stun gun. The
stock gun or
stock gun.
Cattle gun.
Cattle gun. You have right after the scene with Moss explaining everything to Carla Jean, you have the scene with Chigurh in that petrol station where he is irritated by the gas station owner, and his philosophy is reflected there. A philosophy of inevitability, a philosophy of determinism, a philosophy of random chance. It's almost like it's a pessimistic cosmology. It's like the universe is an accident. We're all being carried away by past decisions that are ultimately inevitable, and that he's an inevitable actor in all of this. And anyway,
it's not that clear. That's why a lot of the discussions, people assume McCarthy's read some Wittgenstein and some Nietzsche, and there's this sort of rule-following analogy where we're trying to interpret his morals from the worldview that he has, and maybe he's working it out, but there seems to be something about he doesn't have as much respect for the average Joe Blow, like the gas station attendant. He's, he says, you've been putting it up your whole life. Doesn't seem to respect the fact that he married into, sort of ordinary little small business.
Yeah, he doesn't like people who live, who don't necessarily reflect the self-awareness or self-consciousness of how they've ended up in their particular circumstances, which is a difficult thing to ask to people when they're on the other end of him, other side of him, like.
But see, that's the tricky part here is with the concept of the will, because he has this conflict. It can't just be everything was determined from the past, or maybe there's a little indeterminacy with the coin. Then there's that other thing that he's like the instrument. He's an instrument just like the coin. I got here the same way the coin did when he talks to Carla Jean at the end. But he's constantly implying that it's the decisions people are making that get them there. So it's more like a Jean-Paul Sartre's man is condemned to be free. That you're so free that that even the most mundane of decisions leads to the inevitable consequences of everything that follows. So it's a very, very...
It's very nuanced, huh?
Well, it's just a very, very intense interpretation of the will.
And brutal, because he is brutal. He's brutal. It follows on... Sorry, you're going to...
So, no, I'm saying that's why it's important, those scenes where he's, like, in the book much more so, where he's talking to Carson Wells. He wants him to find dignity in his death, and he obviously respects people following those paths, particularly like Llewelyn Moss's path, because at least he's following his own rules, or he has some rules he lives by.
Yeah.
He's like I don't want to say will to power, but he's trying to live the path that he thinks is most authentic and right for himself. Whereas the others are just sort of going by whatever convention or norm they have. What was the rule that led you here, right? He's trying to get people to interrogate. I'm not quite sure. There's so much you can read into it.
There's so much you can read into it. But the narrative, it will continue with Moss trying to escape, the inevitability of being followed by these cartel characters, right? And so he goes to a motel, he hides the suitcase full of money in an air vent, he goes out to buy some clothing, whatever have you, bits and bobs. He comes back and he sees that there's a car there that looks like the cartel guy's car. In fact, they found him, right? Yeah. These guys have found him because there's a transponder within the suitcase, and they're following that. He stays at a nearby hotel and then comes back to this hotel. It's all quite complicated, but he's trying to retrieve the money that he's placed within the air duct, the air vent, from another hotel room directly behind it. Meanwhile, Chigurh's also got a transponder, so part of the reason why Chigurh will eventually go back and kill the guy who hired him is because this guy has hedged his bets between Chigurh and the other cartel drug runners. Pardon?
Yeah, you mean the American.
The American. He'll go back and kill the guy.
And he's insulted by that. There's one scene at the end of the book that's not in the movie, which again is quite meaningful. Is his discussion with the end boss, who's essentially like the major decision maker, and when he meets him and brings him the money. Because this doesn't happen in the movie.
Well, that spoils. This is what happens. Eventually, Chigurh does retrieve the briefcase from Moss. Not necessarily from Moss.
You want to bring it up later?
I think we should we follow the narrative?
Yeah,
go. In the film, and I think it's similar to the book, Moss, as he's retrieving the suitcase, overhears gunshots because Chigurh goes into Moss's previous room, now inhabited by the cartelists, kills them, right? So he takes the money quickly, Moss, and runs. He hitchhikes, which is a way of bringing the hitchhiking into it, I guess, because
that actually happens later on in the book when he Moss picks up a hitchhiker, and that inevitably leads to his death in the book. In the film, that whole scene is changed. It's all very different. In the interim, you have the investigation. Ed Tom is trying to reach out to Moss through Carla Jean, through his wife, to say that he's way in over his head. He doesn't know what he's gotten himself into. Bodies keep piling up and turning up on account of Chigurh's ruthlessness. But the real changes begin in that hotel that they end up at on the border, where it's all condensed. The dialogue between Chigurh and Moss, Bardem and Josh Brolin within that hotel, it's not there in the film. There's a dialogue where Moss actually catches Chigurh in the book, has him dead to rights, but decides to run for it instead of he could have shot him in the back. He doesn't. So he has a conscience.
Well,
to a large degree, right? He's not a bad guy. His mistake was stealing money that didn't belong to him out of a drug deal gone wrong. So that's opportunism. It's a mistake. It's a theft. But he's not a callous murderer.
Yeah, and it makes it hard, like this whole narrative about, being Nam guys and their Carson Wells calling himself a day trader, because there's...
Well, explain who Carson Wells is.
Well, Carson Wells is going to come in, and he's another Vietnam vet who was a sergeant, had some sort of considerable rank.
Played by Woody Harrelson.
Yeah. But...
all wearing cowboy hats, very much Western style,
and it's difficult to make out because, obviously going to Vietnam to be contracted by the American government to kill in a situation where, by that, as opposed to the Second World War and the First World War, which the old men of the older time would have found a bit more honour and dignity in what they were doing. The Nam War wasn't. It was one that was seen as a, generally, at least in 1980 when the film set, as an immoral war. And so there's this, torn aspect of, what is Moss's experience from that war? Does he really want to keep doing that? He's now back at home. Maybe he's not, born to be a killer. I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to interpret that, because I was trying to think that, why doesn't he kill him? Because he was scarred from the war?
That's in the book. So none of this is in the film. In the film, there's just a shootout, straight up shootout, where Moss is being hunted in the night in this empty street by Chigurh. In the book, in fact, the cartel guys and Chigurh, they intersect upon Moss. They kind of converge upon him at the same time. After Moss runs away from Chigurh, and Chigurh actually nips him with a bullet, he then encounters the cartel guys, and there's a shootout between him and them. So it's much more involved in the book. It works better in the film this way, though. The fact that it's just the two of them, it's like a cat and mouse. Yeah. It's really, really intense. And in fact, Moss ends up nipping Chigurh in the leg. He shoots him in the leg, nipping him. He shoots him. And Chigurh's kind of ruthlessness, his toughness in a sense, even though he's a bad guy, he's an evil guy, you don't want to make him sound tough, but his resoluteness, in spite of all odds, is shown when he basically heals himself. He blows up a car in front of a pharmacy in order to retrieve all of the drugs and utensils, medical supplies that he needs, and then in the book it's described much better. He basically just recuperates almost like a robot shutting down after he extracts the lead pieces from his leg and stitches himself up. Whereas poor Moss, he's been shot in the side. He throws the bag full of money that he's been carrying at the border into the bushes on the side of a riverbank, and then he hobbles into Mexico, gets a coat to cover his bloodied wound, and wakes up in a hospital. Again, it's more involved in the book, but he ends up in the hospital, and that's where Wills finds him. What does Will say to him?
The
Woody
hospital
Harrelson.
scene.
Yeah, it's basically identical in the film.
Yeah,
and the book.
I was going to say that was one of the largely accurate. Sorry. What?
Scenes. Yeah, that was pretty much word for word. he basically offers him a better deal. He says, look, Moss wakes up to see him there, and he says, look, I'm not the guy who's after you, because I know that I've seen him. And he saw him because he...
and he's trying to put the fear of God into him about Chigurh. Whereas Moss is still trying to convince himself that he might be the tough one, and he might be the one to... talks about how he nipped him, and he's convinced that maybe he's dead or hurt enough, but
that's in the book, much more detailed.
Yeah.
Much more detailed. But Wills is saying, look, you've never come up against anyone like this. He's got his own code, his own principles.
And see, that's where the part about the moral psychopath forms, is that you've really starting to get an idea that he's not just a random violent thug. He seems to be constructing or has discovered his own internal rule-following system. So he is authentic. He is following rules. He does do what is right. It's just what is right for him is seemingly immoral to us. And there's some other aspects. Like
You're such a relativist, bro. Seemingly immoral. What would Ed Tom say about that? Who cannot comprehend what kind of a beast from hell Chigurh is.
This is the point, and that's why like so much of the film is about faith, and there's a sort of underpinning of the this is what happens to morality after the death of God, and there's a whole discussion. It's not literally when people stop believing in God, but when Nietzsche argues in, I think it's Thus Spoke Zarathustra or Twilight of the Idols. Can't remember which one. But anyway, the point is that when people truly stop believing in God, they don't understand that you lose everything with it.
Yeah, it's in the gay science.
It's that's right.
By
the gay
happy
science.
Yes.
Yeah. The joyous science, they call it now.
Yeah.
And provides humankind the reasons to follow rules, to be good, to follow all the institutional norms for what is considered the good life. And so then you have to construct your own rules that you follow, the ones that you will yourself to make yourself great. This is a butchering of it, but...
No, but he's very much a Nietzschean character.
But he is following his own rule. He is consistent. And what I was saying is, you're saying it's relativism, but what if you were Chigurh, you could argue, well, what is it for you to say, hey, my country says I need to go over to Vietnam and kill a whole bunch of people, many of them who will turn out to be innocent, but I'm doing it because it's the rule I follow. It's what I consider to be right.
No,
anyway,
there are competing worldviews here being represented by the different characters. In this way, McCarthy is very much like Dostoevsky, who he loves. Actually, he considers Fyodor Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov one of the best novels to have ever been written, including James Joyce's Ulysses and various others. These are his landmark novels. So you can see how every character represents a philosophy. I think in this film, the fact that Ed Tom, the sheriff, serves as a bit of comedy relief is problematic. Did you turn on classical music in the background?
No, it's Max Richter. What?
Has that been playing the whole time?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's
very ambient. I didn't even notice. I was so caught up in
because he
about...
does music, film scores.
Russell has gone all meta on us. Isn't that fantastic? So, look, yeah, they didn't do Ed Tom justice. Tommy Lee Jones played him so well. He portrayed him so well. But Ed Tom's first-person reflections, they're kind of like soliloquies.
Oh, they're so good.
They're so good because they ground the character in his own history. He runs away after defeating some a German battalion after his company is hit by a mortar shell wherever he's fighting in World War II. And the alternative would have been for him to remain with his men. Some of whom he could no longer hear them amidst the rubble, so they were probably all dead.
Yeah, he had
good reason to run away.
To think
he did,
maybe,
but it's haunted him his whole life. And now in the face of Chigurh, he thinks, well, am I running away again? Because he really just wants to retire before he faces such evil.
Doesn't he talk about, I think he's talking about his father, maybe his grandfather who died in war, and he said, well, he died the honourable death. I might be interpreting some of this. He died the honourable death because he committed his life to going to a war knowing that he would die for his country, that it's very likely. And so what he did by running away meant that he didn't die a dignified death.
Yeah, yes. There's that old world chivalry, honor, valor, things we don't talk about anymore, that kind of sacrifice for your country.
He didn't want to accept the Purple Heart.
Well, he didn't want to accept the Purple Heart. See, all of that is in the book. None of it is in the film.
Yeah, and
so you don't understand his motivations actually.
Why would you not accept the Purple Heart unless you thought you were a fraud? Like, that's a really, really serious accusation to cast upon yourself if you're a war veteran. So it's a big point.
It's a big point. It's missing in the film. It's missing. Also in the film, what's missing are his reflections on the encroaching apocalypse. You know, he says that his wife is reading Revelations, which they always get wrong. Maybe deliberately so in the case of Cormac McCarthy putting it as Revelations in his mouth. It's Revelation, apocalypsis in Greek. Anything there about the way the world is headed? He asks his wife. She goes, "I'll let you know when I get to it." You know, obviously it's about the end of the world, Revelation, so the last book of the New Testament in the Bible. Not primarily, but it's mostly about that. So this apocalypse that is, let's say, dawning upon the
signs
new,
and
the
wonders.
New world, signs and wonders. Exactly, he says that, which is again biblical language, is something that's not really reflected upon in the film. Also in the film, language in his conversation with his relative, Ellis, language that appears in Ellis's mouth that I used to believe I'd find God, and that maybe... I
always thought that God would come into my life someday.
That's right.
But he didn't.
That's shifted into Ed Tom's mouth. He's made to say it, which again changes the character because he's a God-fearing man in the book, and more or less.
That's what I was saying. He's a God-fearing man, and so he's trying to make sense of like what's happening. Is this, you know?
He serves his community. And he's trying to make up for that thing that has haunted his conscience.
And in the book, he talks more about the choices of the people, and that's the green hair comments, and you know.
Green hair being the punk rockers.
Back in our days, we had respect and ethics, and now they're all doing drugs, etc. So he's perceiving
that Satan invented dope. You know.
Yes.
But
remember that it's Chigurh. I'm gonna get the name right.
Finally, did
Chigurh is the one who actually follows a lot of those customs. He's always apologizing for being an inconvenience. He's quite polite. He's very clean and tidy as he goes.
I can't believe you're making a case for this lunatic man.
Well,
he's portrayed so well by Javier Bardem. My gosh,
Cormac McCarthy's doing something really odd with him. He's a really odd, and like that's what's so great about Carson Wells, who's
Harrison's character.
When he's explaining to him, you know, I ask yourself, you know, what is it, the rule you've been following that led you up to this point, and was it worth it? And then he just straight away goes, "You're a goddamn maniac," or something like that. Do you know how nuts you are? And he says, "What makes you say that? You know, the nature of this conversation. It's the nature of you."
That's right. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, but he's like a normal person. He's got no time for all these sort of philosophical explorations of
like what we're doing.
Why he's here to kill him, seemingly not for the motivation that would be in someone like Carson Wells, money.
That's right. Carson Wells is offering Chigurh money.
Take you to the ATM and he just laughs.
And he just laughs. I mean, that's right. It's like a higher order of principle, no matter how demented that he's adhering to. But thereafter, so Moss calls Wells, Harrison's character, the other bounty hunter, if you like, for lack of a better term, who's trying to retrieve the money from Chigurh, because Chigurh is like killing people.
He calls him a hitman in the book.
Hitman. And instead of getting Wells on the other end of the phone, he gets Chigurh, and they have that conversation that seems to be setting up a showdown where
Chigurh says, look, the best I can offer, like, you know where I'm going. He goes, I'm going to go to where you've sent your wife, Carla Jean, to stay with her mother in Odessa. I'm putting the words in, it's implied there. It's done more tactfully in the narrative, in the film, in the discourse, but I'm just putting the words into Chigurh's mouth. Moss says, look, I'm going to make you a personal project of mine. I'm going to find you, and she won't be there when you get there. And he's like, it doesn't matter, as in the inevitability of what Chigurh's going to do to his wife. But he offers him, again, an alternative. He says, it's basically an ultimatum. Look, you bring the money to me, and I'll let her live. I can't say the same for you. Your fate is sealed, basically. As in, Chigurh intends to kill Moss, but he'll let his wife go. And that's when he doesn't say, as in Moss doesn't respond with, no, that's not going to happen. He just responds with more aggression. As in, I'm going to make you a personal project of mine. I'm going to come for you and stuff like that. So he wants to best him. After that, Moss gets out of the hospital, cleans himself up. He calls his wife. He gets his wife to move again to El Paso. Now, here's where dramatic change between the book and the film. And go ahead, you explain.
We'll try not to tease it out too long because there's important details, but it's quite long as well. But it's him on the road. He picks up a teenage hitchhiker.
Teenage girl,
yeah, and they're trying to, I feel like, make some ambiguity about she's attracted to him and he might be attracted to her, but he ultimately ends up not doing anything with her.
Yeah, he says, I'm married.
Yeah.
And that's, again, because he does lean into that. He wants to help her out because she's like a vagrant.
Yeah, and they cause her sister, and then in the police report, when they both end up getting shot.
By who, though? By who? Who do you expect it to be?
The Mexican cartels.
But you expect it to be Chigurh, but it's not.
I just quickly wanted to note that they referred to her as a skank in the book.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really funny because I haven't heard that term since I was like 10 years old. And it was had a very tawdry appearance that the sheriff didn't want to have to then tell Carla Jean about. And this is the point of it. There's no big showdown with Chigurh. Like, he just goes out looking like he's, been with a prostitute or something. His wife's going to find out, and then in the book Ed talks about how terrible he feels, and he wants to let her know that nothing happened, but Carla Jean won't speak to him after the death.
Yeah.
But it's such a massive anticlimax.
It's
massive.
It's a massive anticlimax.
And it's the same in the film. The film still does that well. I remember when I was watching, I was like, what? That's it?
I had the same feeling when I saw it. So basically in the film,
He gone?
He organises to meet Carla Jean, who's taking her mother who has cancer. So she's got to take her mother with her to El Paso. And the Mexican cartels members, apart from Chigurh, are still hunting her. They're hunting her now as a lead. They're trying to get her to lead them to Moss and the money. And that's what inevitably happens in the film. This doesn't happen in the book. In the book, the cartel guys...
You should call this comparing the film to the book.
But it's good though, because it's such a big difference. In the book, the cartel guys, independently of Chigurh, find him staying in a hotel on the side of the road that he was driving to meet Carla Jean in a different room from this young girl.
But she also doesn't...
Right? He got her a room.
She also doesn't get
a separate
Ed
room.
Holmes involved in the book.
Ed Holmes.
Ed Holmes is that comedian. She doesn't get Ed Tom involved, does she?
She calls him, but it's too late because eventually Ed Tom gets called in to identify Moss's body in the morgue.
Okay.
But in the film, he finds him dead. He finds him after.
That's right.
After the cartel guys follow Carla Jean, right, and then they find out from the mother, who's a bit like, she's old and senile, where it is that they're going, El Paso, because that's happening while they're putting their luggage into a taxi cab. One of the
cartel guys comes to help the old lady put the... Oh, where are you going? She goes, oh, El Paso. Do you know how many people I know there? Nobody. Oh, tell me where you're staying. And that's when how they find out where Moss is going to be. Moss is at the hotel waiting for his wife. The skank, inverted commas, I don't like using that term, for lack of a better term, I don't remember what her name is in the book, is now actually has rented her own room, offers him a big, she's flirting with him. He rebuffs her saying, I'm married. Yeah. The screen goes dark. It goes light again. It's Ed Tom. Carla Jean has told Ed Tom where she's going to be meeting Moss. He's driving to this motel on the side of the road. He hears gunshots. The cartel guys are driving away with the money, presumably. And then he gets out of the car. He finds the girl dead. The girl who was the hitchhiker in the book. And then he goes in and finds Moss dead on the ground.
There's a whole lot of great dialogue between them as well about you being the...
Moss is the hero of the... he's a guy you're rooting for, and in both the book and the film, he's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's dead. And then the outcome, the consequence of his decision to go after Chigurh will play out for his wife, not for him. It gets his wife because Chigurh, in that sick and twisted logic of keeping his promises, it's almost as though he waits for Carla Jean's mother to die, and then he rocks up at Carla Jean's house and he offers her the same coin toss as he did the gas stop.
The dialogue's slightly longer in the book with the Carla Jean dialogue, right?
Yeah, it is longer. Yeah,
and he's explaining to her, there's actually one part where he's saying he wanted you dead. It's a little bit more explicit, and she still pushes back with the logic of, well, no, it's you and you're making this decision. But then again, he returns with, you are as much a part of the decision-making process too. And that fits with her mother, who keeps saying, I told you a million times, this was trouble, good. So, yeah, you can see some consistency there. He is, I guess you could say, they're walking in that path, that they know the risks they're taking. But then again, I don't really know what his Chigurh's solution is then. Where are the people that have been following the rule that doesn't lead them to be hunted down by a sociopathic killer?
Well, this sociopathic killer gets divine retribution, if you like, or his comeuppance or karma, whatever you want to call it. I mean, depending on which perspective, which lens you're interpreting what happens next from. If it's from Ed Tom's, it's a bit of divine justice, but it's ambiguous as to whether he dies. He gets into a car accident after he kills Carla Jean, and it roughs him up pretty bad. But the bone comes out of the side of his arm.
In the book, does that... No, but isn't he in the car accident and then he meets the...
Is it the other way around in the book? Oh, no, it's not. It's after Carla Jean. It happens after, because he's not busted up when he meets Carla Jean.
No. I mean, he meets the big boss and...
No, it's before.
Oh.
The last thing you see of Chigurh is him walking away from that accident, limping away, covered in blood. And you don't know whether he survived or not. He asked the boy for these kids who see the car accident come over to help him for a shirt, in the same way that Josh Brolin, after he shot at that hotel by Chigurh, where in the book...
No, that's not right.
Wait, there's symmetry here. There's symmetry here, because Josh Brolin buys the coat to cover himself. Chigurh buys the shirt. So ultimately, they're both very similar. And it could imply that Chigurh will have a similar fate to Brolin. You see, they're on similar paths.
But
anyway, that's just the point.
I can't remember, because I only read the book this week, but I'm sure that...
You listen to the audio book.
Part of the, No, because when he kills... No, it doesn't make sense. Because he kills Carla Jean, and then he interviews the boys. Remember? And so Ed is doing these interviews with the boys. He knows they're lying. He knows that they won't say who they are. And then that's when he goes to the state and he quits. Because he knows he's an old man that can't... This country...
No country for him.
Yeah,
it's no country for him. Yeah.
And I'm sure that what is happening is he's definitely survived, and that's like all the stuff about him being a ghost. is he knows that if he stays in the world trying to find this man, he will either end up becoming corrupted or bad like the Wells and the Mosses of the world, or he is just going to find himself dead.
Yeah, but there's ultimate hope even for Ed Tom, because the very last thing that we
We'll
read
have to
in
read
the
the
book
book again, which I'm going to do anyway, because it's so good.
It's such a great book. The very last, so we'll end with this, because we're at the end of the book and the film now, and in the film he's recounting it to his wife, who's totally undervalued in the film. In the book she's so important. His love for her is what's keeping him is preventing him from facing Chigurh, basically, and that kind of evil. He's actually not telling her in the book, but he's reflecting upon a dream that he just had about his father, who didn't say much, very simple, was in the Great War, okay? And his father was riding on a horse. It passes him and goes on ahead into the darkness in front of him, into the darkness, and he's holding in a horn fire, which is an apocalyptic image. It's also a symbol of hope as well, and of renewal and warmth. And that he knew that his father didn't say anything to him, right? Rode on ahead with this horn with fire, carrying fire, that he would go and make a place for him, and that when Ed Tom would finally reach that destination, they'd be together and everything would be okay. And then he woke up. So it could be about his own death, that he'll meet his dad again. It could be that there's hope still, that there are still these people, even though we might remember them in dreams and memory out there, who will be like heroes, frontiersmen, charting a path before us, creating order out of chaos, bringing light into the darkness. And I think that that's as hopeful a message as you can get from the end of this novel and the end of the film, which leaves the possibility of Chigurh still being out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it meant that he knows his time is up. He's done. He's left. He's retired. He couldn't take out the evil, and that he'll soon be with his father.
Can't you leave me with the whole metaphysical allegorical interpretation? Did you have to derail it?
I don't know.
At the end of the video?
But I was trying.
At the end of the video?
I tried to figure out what it meant. I know I've watched that scene like multiple times, like the YouTube clip of it, and it used to drive me mad. I can't quite make out what. Also, the stuff about the fire and a little bit like the fire. Is it in Exodus?
Exodus.
Yeah.
Exodus. It's God appears as a pillar of fire leading the way. Yeah. There is that element there as well. These are all.
It's so addictive because the narratives that aren't explicit, like you get in a lot of films, like On the Nose, the ones that leave room for interpretation are always more enjoyable.
Oh, that's true. I agree with that.
That's what makes it film.
That's why Lynch is so good and so many others that we've addressed. Next will be, we decided today, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by Sergio Leone.
More country and western. Country and western. Well,
That's his music taste. See you all. Bye-bye.